Alexa or Siri.
That's my struggle.
Yeah. It's getting better, but yeah. Limitations.
Yep. If I use my Spanish intonation, it's like, did you want to say this? I'm like,
no,
slow down.
Well, I don't have a café con leche, chicas, but I do have un matecito.
Yeah.
Voy a traer mi cafecito.
I have tea.
Muy bien.
Black tea.
Nice.
Do you put leche in your mate? Do you make it a latte?
Sometimes, but today was not.
Not a latte day.
All right, welcome everybody to our kickoff of Hispanic Heritage Month here at Penn West. We're excited to present Café con Leche, a panel discussion about Latinidad. And we have a panel of faculty and students that are here today to present the panel. Let me get set up a little bit. Let me try and get the gallery of everybody here. My name is Chris Lafure. I'm with the Communications Office, and I'm here to present our panel. Today we have the director of this project, Dr. Stephanie Diaz-Morel from Social Work. We also have Dr. Sheila Lorenzo de la Peña from Art Therapy, Dr. Sandra Trejos from Economics, and students Lakshmi Cruz Galan and Emma Arrojo. Sorry if I hopefully I got everybody's name correctly. It's nice to meet everybody. It's nice for everybody to be here. We will have a Q&A afterwards. So we have this live on YouTube, but we also have people on our Zoom as well. So if there are any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat, or feel free to submit them in the comments, and we will get to them at the end. Now we will have some video, we will have some music, we will have a slideshow, so there's plenty to see for everybody. And this presentation will be published on YouTube. So if it's something you'd like to revisit or share with somebody throughout Hispanic Heritage and Latinx Heritage Month, feel free to do so. Feel free to share it and revisit and watch it. There's some good content that we're going to present to you today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Stephanie Diaz-Morel.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Café con Leche panel discussion about Latinidad, how culture impacts our lives. Since 1988, from September 15th through October 15th, in the United States, we observe and acknowledge Hispanic Heritage Month, also known as Latino, Latina, Latin, or Latinx Heritage Month. And we'll talk about all those different names during today's Café con Leche as well. And this is really an opportunity to recognize and celebrate the culture, the contributions, and the heritage of the American people whose ancestries come from Mexico, the Caribbean, Spain, Central America, and South American, what are known collectively as Latino cultures. And we recognize the adopted term of Latinx Heritage Month, as this centers on the people of Latin American origin or descent, and it's used as an attempt to be more inclusive of a gender-neutral alternative to Latino or Latina. We can also acknowledge the term Latin in the same way. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the historical activism of those who have advocated, struggled, and fought for us to be in an inclusive academic space, as historically we were not. And it's thanks to their efforts that we are gathered here today to discuss Latino culture with you all. Now, as today's discussion is called a Café con Leche discussion, pictured here is a Café con Leche. And it's really similar to a latte culturally, but having a café con leche is a tradition that includes more than just enjoying a cup of coffee. saying to someone, a friend, family member, or even someone you just met, let's have a café con leche, you are inviting them into your home, into your life. You're creating a space for a deeper connection through authentic conversation. So café con leche can be a way of life in many Latino households. And it's very common to sit around the table at family gatherings to drink and enjoy for hours in conversation. Often over a café con leche, families and friends who become family discuss their daily lives. They share what they are struggling with, what they're living with, and even practice being brave or being vulnerable with one another as they share in some of these moments that life can bring. So before we would begin, I would like to just acknowledge you all for taking the time to attend this presentation, showing a picture of what is to come soon, right? With the changing of the seasons here in beautiful Pennsylvania, and just acknowledge you for being present, attending the conversation, and taking a moment to learn more and to strive for more during a time when life might be a bit tumultuous for all of us. The paths that each of us are on can impact your well-being in different ways. So I'd just like to acknowledge you for taking the time to be here and to be present. And if you feel that it's helpful to you today to be present in the moment, I invite you to take a deep breath in and exhale. We can try that one more time. You can take a deep breath in and exhale. And just ground yourself to this day, to this moment, and to being present. So here is, for some orientation, a map of what central part of the Caribbean and South American cultures look like. It's a representation of who we have on the panel today, right? People on today's Café con Leche panel come from all of these various regions, and we'll share a little bit more about that, but just wanted to give you some geographical sense of the various intersectionalities and identities of those who are on the panel today. All right, so with that, let's begin by talking a bit about heritage, sharing about what is, your heritage or your connection to being Latino, Latina. And this can include sharing about any family or friend customs that you enjoy, any of your favorite dishes or a favorite dish, or anything else about familia or cultura that you'd like to share.
You mind if I go?
Please.
I want to bounce off of your beautiful image of what's to come, right? Like the seasonal changes. Up here, it's been really warm this year, right? And then now in the last literally 2 days, the temperature's begun to change, right? We're getting this, like, nature is starting to remind us that we're gonna need to slow down production and slow down before winter. And so in driving back and forth, to the grocery store, what have you, I'm noticing the corn, which is usually what we see towards the end of the summer season. And so watching the corn grow in the fields, talking to my daughters how to recognize the corn plant from, the tomatoes we have at home and from other crops that we're seeing. And that has sort of sparked a memory. I guess now we're using the term glimmer. It's been giving me these glimmers of other generations of being home at this time. And by home, I don't mean up here. I mean like in Miami or in Cuba, and being in a patio with all the grandmas. You'd have my mom, you'd have my sister and I, the grandmas too, y algunos abuelos, con su cuchillo afilado, y in a bucket, and the corn, right? The men would like open the corn husk and get it ready, give it to the women, and we'd have a knife and we'd be chucking all the corn kernels into el sartén or la vasija. And then we would prepare it to make fresh tamales.
Mhm.
Now, that art of having all that troop around and how to like fold the leaves and tie the, no tengo la paciencia. And it's just us up here. So I was like, what can I do? Because the flavor is missing. My tongue is salivating and I want this, right? I want my children to have this. And so tamal en cazuela, right? Like, I don't know that many people know it. I don't know that I've seen it at restaurants ever, but I know it's something I grew up tasting. And so I started looking it up, like, how do I make this? Can I make this? Do I need something that I can't get? And I found a couple recipes that, of course, I had to like doctor up my way. And I made it the other day. And I found myself as I'm making it, I'm like doing this in the kitchen. The corn is flying everywhere because I didn't put a cazuela down, right? I'm standing up, I'm not sitting down.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband's in front of me and I'm talking to him like, don't you know how to do this? Like, you have to sit down. You have to like do it this way. And he's using his body to catch all the corn that's flying. Like, this isn't an everyday thing. It's okay. It's okay to have a messy kitchen when you're just sharing stories. And so we fell into sharing stories as we cook. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's almost like a mini Thanksgiving. And that's how I celebrate Thanksgiving, which is coming up. I want everyone together with their hands making food and sharing their stories of what it's like to cook together and how they got here. So Steph, did you have the picture? Or do you want me to share in case there's some folks that don't know what tamal en cazuela is?
Sure, I will share it.
Usually it's got carnitas. So it's got like a punch of like sweetness and a bit of saltiness and deliciousness. The corn itself is sweet. The one I made, I didn't have carnitas. So mine, I could say, was like semi-veggie. So I used like a turkey base and other things, but I did the usual stir frying of the seasonings and the vegetables, and my kids actually ate it. That was like, yes, I did it. So it's something that's really delicious. And if you like corn, then maybe you give it a try. It screams this time of year. It's like, it tastes like summer and fall had a baby. And you don't have to put it in a nice little like leaf and then cook it some more, and which that's beautiful too. But if you don't have that time, then this is your shortcut.
Wonderful. Looks delicious. Thank you for sharing it. Sounds like you had, what, like you said, this the Cuban tamal, right? And had a big part of sharing this moment with your family, but something that's really been passed down, right, from your heritage, because you had that moment before with your moms and your grandparents.
Yeah, every year it's like abuela and my mom, and then myself and my sister and anybody else who was around that knew, because you'd always have to ask like, wait, and how do you do this? And what do you put? And everybody tells you like, eso es mucho, mija, un poquitico menos, or you got to do this thing.
Did you hear them while you were doing it? You heard like their voices of like
totally. And I was
like, that's trying too much.
Yep. I'm trying not to use my phone. I'm trying not to text people or call them and be like, so what do you do? I'm like, I need to do this. This needs to be me.
Sheila, you just inspired me to take my turn because you spoke to my heart. So for people who don't know about me, so I'm Dr. Trejos, professor of economics. I'm starting my 20th year with Penn West, former Clare University of Pennsylvania. Yes, thank you so much. So yes, my heart is warm to think that pretty much my husband and I, we raised our 4 daughters, and the youngest is 20 here in Pennsylvania. So it's very interesting because I'm such a Costa Rican, right, in Pennsylvania. And yes, I count my blessings and I understand and I believe that we are where we are for a reason. So my connection to Latino heritage culture is that I was born in Costa Rica, raised in Costa Rica, and did not come to the United States until I had to do graduate school. And I wanted to, we got an opportunity financially from the US government to study here because we had no money to do so otherwise. And then, sharing a little bit of who I am with people in the audience in attendance. Yes, our kids grew up with a lot of, like, because my husband is from Costa Rica too. We came together to study. We went back for 2.5 years after finishing graduate school, but then we came back, and we've been back since 2000. So 3 daughters were born in the United States. The 3rd daughter was born in Costa Rica, but now we're all U.S. citizens. So it's been a journey. Having said that, I connect with the tamal story because, of course, same. I grew up making tamales with my family in Costa Rica, and it becomes a family event. So grandpa is tying the leaves, because we do the leaf style with the plantain banana leaves. And Tia Vera is checking that it tastes well, but then my mom disagrees. Then grandma says a little bit of salt, please, more, and so on and so forth. And you understand, you're supposed to be there. This is like a family party. And actually, my mom calls it the La Fiesta del Tamal. La Fiesta del Tamal means we all make tamales, we all eat tamales at the end, and we all gather together. If someone was working, come at the end of the day, because you're going to eat a tamal. If you could help during the day, great. If not, still the party is going. And of course, raising 4 kids, at times I wanted to eat the tamal, but you have to pick your battles. We didn't sometimes, most of the time, we didn't get to make tamales, but now it's become a tradition back because the girls are older. So they've now learned to ask, like, when are we making tamales? Because they develop that sense of, this is nice, we can just cook, and I play Costa Rican music, and I do my handkerchief around my head, I do look like a cafeteria ready to go lady proudly, and so on and so forth, my apron, it gets very, very traditional. And I must say, at times, since in Costa Rica they can buy the tamales there, they don't sell tamales here around Clarion or Western Pennsylvania. Maybe sometimes we live the tradition even more strongly than maybe some of my siblings who live there, because they just buy them, or maybe my mom makes them. So intentional, I just want people to remember this, the intentional commitment with your culture, right? Because it brings happiness. It's part of who we are. We cannot try to not see it. And I commend Sheila, because Sheila's husband is not a Latino, but she did it, and she's sharing with the husband, right? We cannot not be ourselves. Our identity is very important. So it makes, once mom is happy, I think everyone is happier, and then it becomes just a very nice way of celebrating who we are. Another thing that I do with Café con Leche, related to the Café con Leche theme, is that I love to invite my Latino friends in Clarion for coffee. Now, lately it's being like, sure, can I bring wine? Someone wants a margarita, and that's okay. We're of age, we can drink. But it's being around, let's have coffee together, host them, and connect and speak Spanish and just share who we are. I'll stop there.
I'll jump in here with the last thing that you said about speaking Spanish, because that is something that I guard, and I feel like it's so important, because at one point, after living in rural Pennsylvania for many years and not having that many Latino connections, like many of us have experienced, of that, a little bit of isolation and trying to figure out exactly, who you are within, and trying to understand how to navigate this new system. I totally forgot my Spanish, and this is the language that I was born speaking, that defines like my true identity. I feel like I'm completely different when I speak Spanish. I can express myself in such a beautiful, kind, patient way. And I feel like that is so close to like my true nature. And after moving away and coming back to Erie, I am really grateful to, have opportunities like this, where I'm seeing my community grow and have more opportunities, and I can be a part of it too. It's so amazing. I love that, you know, my advisor for grad school is Latina, and I can have the opportunity to be in this panel. Like, this is incredible. And it means so much to me. And I can't imagine what it means to, you know, a student that maybe is considering coming to Penn West. And, you know, like knowing already that there's this community and that they can be part of conversations like this. It's really special.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for sharing. So I'll share a little bit too. So my family is originally from Argentina, and I am a first generation American Argentine. So I am the youngest of my siblings. We're three girls, and I was the only one that was born here in the US. And when my parents came to the US, they immigrated to Miami, which is a large, you know, melting pot, it's a large city, one of the largest cities in the US, and has a very large representation of people from the Caribbean, Central and South America. So I always had a lot of experiences and opportunities to be with others that identified as Latino, Latina. And, you know, growing up, that definitely brought about, I think, a good experience of learning some similarities and differences within Latino cultures. You know, the food, of course, the music, but even just the terminology. Even though we all speak Spanish, we have different accents, and the words that we use might be like an innocent word in one country and could be like a curse word in another. So those are the kind of growing pains or things that you learn as you interact with other Latinos. But then, you know, fast forward and moving here to Northwest Pennsylvania, I had similar experiences as you have all mentioned, of kind of yearning for some more of that connection. But it did bring about the opportunity to reach out to my roots, pull from those experiences, and start creating customs, you know, in my home. So my spouse is actually from the Dominican Republic, and he really enjoys a typical food that they have there, which they call los tres golpes. It's like a typical breakfast food, right? It's mashed plantains with some sausage and eggs, and sometimes avocado and fried cheese. So I was trying to learn how to make it, and it was very difficult because even though I am, you know, Latina, in Argentina, we don't use plantains, right? We're not a Caribbean zone. We don't, that isn't something that is found. But I grew up in Miami, and Miami is subtropical, and there were plenty of plantains. So I had some familiarity from spending time with my friends that have become family over the years, and you know, asking my mother-in-law for some cooking tips. I was able to learn how to make a fusion. And now I have several dishes that are kind of staples in our home, including these empanadas that I make, where I mix some Dominican flair with some Argentine flair, and we have Dominican Argentine empanadas.
Stephanie,
So-
don't forget it's around lunchtime. We're getting hungry.
In case you weren't hungry before,
Some
you
of my
might get hungry now.
favorites.
So, you know, it's been, for me, when I think about heritage, you know, there's just so many layers that come with it. And living in a place now where we can still pull from those examples, we can be with other people, we can have these conversations, we can have these fusions, you know, and enjoy them, I think is a big part of about sharing our heritage, right, with ourselves, with others, and with the Penn West community, right? Like Lakshmi was saying, others as well, knowing that we're here, right? And we're happy to be here and to continue to grow, you know, within Northwest Pennsylvania and beyond.
You're
all
gonna
right.
have to send us the tres golpes recipe. You should put it in the chat.
All right. Yes, I will. It's a little bit of a chemistry mix. Actually, there's some chemistry involved because if you start mashing hot plantains, what happens? They become a solid really quickly. So you have to put cold into them, right? To make sure that they have the smooth consistency. And there's different modalities to do it. Everyone has their own little trick of the trade. My mother-in-law likes to use ice. But then her sister, so my husband's aunt, likes to use ice water. So they got into a whole discussion about it. And then whether you put the salt before the ice water or after the ice water is also all about chemistry. It's very interesting. So I will, but I'll share absolutely.
Yeah, and just for people who don't know much about the plátano maduro, is a ripe plantain, really, because people have asked me like these bananas that look a little different, and so they are supposed to be cooked. You fry them, you can put them in the oven, and the more you let them ripe, the sweeter they are, and they are also a staple in Costa Rica and in most countries in Latin America. You can use them for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. It's very nice. You can look up at recipes for sweet plantains, and you will probably like it.
All right. So now that you
Yeah.
said you have to cook it, I'm like, wait, I sometimes eat them raw and they taste just fine. And my 5-year-old has been going up to like the fruit stand in the house. And she's like, I want this banana. I want this big banana, not the little. I'm like, that's not a banana. That's a plantain. And we're waiting for it to go black. Like, go get yourself a banana. She's like, no, I want this one. So we're working on that one.
Yeah. It's also like you were saying, plátanos is something that kind of unites us all as Latinos, but it's also something that on like a global level as well. I love the way that we can see our history and all of the different influences and connections through our food. One of my favorite things are quipes, which is a street food in Dominican Republic. They're like a type of wheat that is filled with ground beef, and it's very similar to the Lebanese dish. It's exactly the same as kibbeh. They even share a very similar name. But yeah, and that is because there was in our history a huge migration of Lebanese people into South America and the Caribbean. And I just love seeing that there isn't anything random that we can observe within our culture. We have taken the best out of every situation and just enmeshed that in ours, and it's just something really awesome. Yeah. I recently read a book that was talking about the term Latino as this like term for solidarity and community that is something that like unites all people, and I just loved reading that.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Right. A lot of connections and so much, I mean, historically as well. So, along that same line, when we think about the term Latina or Latino, right? Latin, for the more, gender neutral term as well in Spanish, besides checking a box, right, that might say, what is your culture, ethnicity, or, kind of unmasking a little more of what does that mean? What makes someone identify as Latino or Latina, right? Is it Spanish speaking? Is it native born? Is it come to defining what Latino identity is in the United States today, right? What do you think of when you think what makes someone or yourself, right? What makes someone or yourself Latino, Latina, Latin?
So I'm gonna start, if you don't mind it, because of course you go to school, elementary school, and you learn that Costa Rica as a Costa Rican in a Costa Rican school is part of Latin America. But then you define yourself as Costa Rican. You don't grow up, at least in my case, you don't say I'm a Latina, I'm a Costa Rican. This is my country, I'm a Costa Rican, that's it. yes, Costa Rica is part of Latin America. It's like saying United States is part of North America, right? But people don't say I'm North American. They say I'm a US citizen, right? So not until you get to a new place where we are, to me, this is my experience, or this is how I feel, part of a bigger group, then, so you're a Latina, because then it's harder to say you're Venezuelan, you're Mexican, you're, which, by the way, there is a tendency of people insisting that we're Mexican, but we're not, because, Latin America has several countries. And I say it because of anecdotes that my daughters went through a little bit, when some classmates would insist they were Mexican, and they were not. They were Latinas, they are Hispanics, and they were US Costa Rican. They were born in United States, 3 of them, but raised and also raised by Costa Ricans. I would say, Costa Rican materials. And they have a Costa Rican passport as well, US and Costa Rican passport. But then, to me, being a Latina is being Costa Rican, as I said, because this is how I see myself, as part of a bigger group. And I just wrote something because, just very quickly, that I was inspired this morning to just, from the bottom of my heart, thinking, how do you see your upbringing, now being a Latina, but the Costa Rican who you are, and the lifestyle. So for me, being a Latina is a lifestyle. It's a way of living, more than a lifestyle. Way of living, way of seeing the world, way of raising your kids, way of connecting with people, way of speaking and talking. And for what it's worth, to me, being me, the Latina, the Costa Rican, who was raised in Costa Rica and came to the United States to study, and then had the opportunity to work for a higher education in Pennsylvania. So to me, it's being oneself, raised with Latino ways, Latino manners. It is taking for granted spring-like weather all year round. It is living in peace and democracy. It's eating at your grandparents' house every Sunday and seeing them in prayer for the entire family regularly. It is singing the national anthem every Monday at school and walking to high school because you live in a safe city. It is being used to picking fruit directly from a tree and being surrounded by mountains and blue skies daily. It is taking for granted that progress can happen in a less developed country whose GDP is lower. And I could have kept going, but I had to get ready for this. I just wanted that spoke from the heart. I was not going to share it, but I felt like writing. This is who I am. This is how a person like me was defined. All of these things I lived, and it determined what I believe in, what impacted me, and how I view the world in many ways. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sandra. Any other thoughts?
Besides that, I love that, Sandra. It was quite nice. It was moving. It was making me picture all of these things, and thank goodness we have a blue sky today. When I came up to this question, I couldn't come up with a specific answer either. I was like, it's everything. Like, I was born in Cuba, but my husband was born here. Until, just minor correction, no issue. He was born here to a Cuban family, but all his family is here, whereas most of mine isn't here. So by now we have some family members in Miami, but most of it is still back in Cuba. And so whenever someone asks me, like, where are you from? I think, wait, which one? of me is from where. Like I always feel split. And so it's usually a little bit of a struggle. Like, okay, do you mean where am I from in the US, or do you mean where am I from like place of birth? Because I went through middle school and high school and elementary, all of the schooling's pretty much here, but I still feel connected to there. And so that is almost like walking on a fence. And sometimes I lean more one way and sometimes I lean more the other way, but they're both a part of who I am. And they both have influenced greatly how I'm raising my children now. Right? Like my interests, my culinary interests, which are part of, I think now part of my artistic practice, is to make sure, like, you know, mommy is wild in the kitchen and she experiments. And my daughter just told me that last night. It's like, mommy, you do good art, but I like Papa's cooking better. I think what she means, it's safe because it's like chicken nuggets and little simple things that he can just throw together. So we're still working on his whole culinary experience. But so I am, because we're in Pennsylvania, because we're removed from like all of the family, I'm making that effort. And it takes a lot more effort to bring those recipes, to bring those memories, experiences, those sentiments that potentially like I took for granted when I was growing up in Miami, and we could just go to Sedano's or we could go to, you know, Publix, and making sure, striving for my daughters to get some of that, to experience it, right? For them to speak Spanish, for them to hear it, whether it's, you know, straight up Spanish, whether it's Spanglish, whether it's on their TV or hablando con los abuelos, right? I'm like, abuelos, hablan español, right? Stop going to the English, like just go in Spanish, to force them to bring out the words. And so the older one goes there, the little one, not as much, but I could talk to her in Spanish and then she'll be like, Mama, you know, she'll answer. So she understands, but she's not yet throwing out the words. So fingers crossed. So I think it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Sheila. And you know, I think that it's a hard, at least personally for me, it's hard to define, you know, what does it mean to be Latina, right? Which is how I would identify myself if someone were to ask, because a lot of it has to do with stereotypes, preconceived notions, biases, and even, you know, some events of discrimination that you might have experienced within your life. And within the Latino cultures, you know, as Sandra mentioned, a typical anecdote that tends to happen is people are like, oh, you speak Spanish, so you're Mexican. And that's definitely one that people gravitate towards because they might not know, or for whatever reason, that's just what they, you know, again, they have these biases. But how it's perceived by the person who says, well, no, I'm actually Argentina, right? Or having these various intersectionalities and layers, like I identify as the daughter of immigrants. And my parents came to the United States, and they came during a time of civil unrest in Argentina. There was actually a civil war going on. There was a guerrilla army that rose up against the government during this time. This was in the 1980s. It was called La Época de los Milicos, in the 70s and 80s. And there were a lot of, you know, war crimes that were occurring at the time. And when my parents were able to obtain a visa to come to work and live in the US, they came so with the similar kind of American dream that so many other immigrants have done, which is wanting to provide a better life for their family, right? At that time, they had 2 young girls. Both of my sisters were, you know, under the age of 5. And I was not in the picture yet, or a plan, but it came along later on. And they came here and they worked, and they're, you know, my father used to always say to me, if you dream it, you can do it. Which, funny enough, since we moved to Florida, is a saying that came from like Walt Disney, I think, or at least he markets it a lot. but that always stuck with me, right? It was essentially my family's hope for us was that, we came here to work, to provide a life for our daughters so they can have a better life than what we were experiencing living in a country where there was constant terror and fear. And so, a lot of when I think of what does it mean to be Latina, I carry a lot of that, right? That generational experience, the stories of my, of my parents, and even of my, parents before them, my grandparents and great grandparents who also immigrated to the country, and living in the U.S. and having that intersectionality of being an immigrant, but my Latinidad, right? My level of Latinidad also being called into question, because that happens within the community, right? So there's a lot of mixed feelings, again, when it comes to what does it mean to be Latina? What does this identity mean for you? And I think that's a shared experience for other people as well, that have these varying intersections in their lives, right? Knowing that there's a lot that makes us who we are as people, and our culture, our heritage is just another layer of that. And so, the complexities of living in a day-to-day life just within ourselves are vast. But having I think experiences and heritage to guide you in your journey moving forward in life, to find things out, right? It's just an ongoing discovery, and ongoing moments of having conversations with others who might relate, who can understand what some of this feels like, providing hopefully a learning opportunity for those who had never thought of this as a perspective, and now we're sharing about it during this month, and how these varying intersectionalities might be impacting others as well, not just us, or me, I should say, because I'm speaking about myself. And then sharing, celebrating those differences while also acknowledging those connections, like delicious food and moments with family, which we can all enjoy.
If I may ask, I'm sorry, about the teaching of Spanish to your kids, which is very commendable, Sheila, and every parent who tries that. Humbly, I share that that diligence of yours will pay off, because especially as Stephanie was saying, that, it's different when you are growing in a place. I think you both had the opportunity where there's a lot of Latinos, because actually they see that you somewhat look like a Latino. They start speaking in Spanish. The child may not have an option than answering in Spanish because he knows Spanish. In a place that is less diverse, like let's say Western Pennsylvania, the homework is more on the parents. Like, we are the ones who are going to speak in Spanish to our kids, no one else, unless you invite your Latino friends who become a handful, because there is no visiting grandparents on a regular basis and so on. Although we did have the commitment to go to Costa Rica, we try to every year, to the best of our abilities, to keep the connection with the country, the culture, the grandparents, the extended family, because our extended family is back in Costa Rica for the most part. But not giving up, because I remember they went through a cycle. It's not cool to, they would question at certain age, around maybe 10 to 12 or so. When they're kids, they don't question so much. But when they're a little older, they say, why do we need to speak Spanish? Like, we don't need it, right? It's like, just speak to me in English. And then, of course, we come from teaching or speaking in English in our own jobs. And then all of a sudden, I'm speaking in English at the table. And that's not my mother tongue. And I was like, why am I speaking? I need to speak Spanish. And then I said, girls, and then mindful of having to teach them. So, okay, now, Spanish at the table. So, pásame la leche, sírveme, alcanzame la servilleta. But there was one of them once that said, okay, I said, okay, girls, if you don't ask in Spanish, we're not passing anything. I was becoming more strict about it. And she was going to
My
stand up.
dad did that too, Sandra.
Ay, qué bueno tu papá, que bien me cae. But the clever child, we won't say names, she was going to stand up and grab what she needed because she was not going to ask. She said, no, that's not it. Anyways, the perseverance. But then it came a time when knowing Spanish was cool, because then they became like preteen teenagers, and kids say, wow, do you speak Spanish? And now it was great. And I think they were grateful that and now that they are in their 20s, the youngest is 20, the oldest is 29, I know that they will probably not be happy if we had not taught them Spanish. So hang in there. We don't give up. Good for your father, good for Sheila and anyone else who's teaching, and there is never too late. We can always do it. If not for our grandkids, who now I see that maybe I'm going to have to be very intentional with my grandkids, because I know it's harder if you marry someone who doesn't speak Spanish, to keep the Spanish going, and so on and so forth. But it is a gift that we give to our children to be bilingual. In the end, for the job market, is very valuable. I get excited about this. I'll be quiet now.
Well,
Yes.
can I jump in real quick? Because that is exciting, right? Like, I'm the first one that, living in Florida, I had to learn English, like when we moved to Florida. And so growing up, hearing it, I was like, no, I need to lean into the English. I need to learn English. My dad is hardcore, like, español solo en esta casa, porque I don't speak English. And we've been here over 20 years. And I think he's now letting go at the edges. Like, I'll speak in English if I forget to him, and he'll reply. But for many, many years, all through high school and undergrad, he'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. He'd like ignore me if I didn't speak in Spanish. And to anybody, any boyfriends I brought home, he was like, tiene que hablar español, porque si no, ¿cómo se va a comunicar conmigo? I was like, oh my God, like, you work all day, every day. I know you speak English, but never in la casa. And so that was so like a struggle growing up, but appreciated now. And actually, my husband wasn't raised speaking Spanish. He would hear it, but it wasn't enforced in the household like it was in mine. And so we struggled because of Dad. But eventually he did take it up. And so my husband was teaching himself Spanish to be able to communicate with my family as well as his. Interesting story. It didn't come out of his mouth until one year when we're like, you know what? Now we're married. We have a child. Another one was on the way at the time. We're like, it's time we go to Cuba. I want you to meet my family. And in Cuba, my grandma, one of my grandmas was still there. I think she'll be 101 this year. Maybe I'll get to visit. But she was like 99 or maybe a little bit, 97 at the time. It was going to be her birthday. And I kept leaving him with all las abuelas and all the tias alone, just my husband and them. He came back speaking so much Spanish because it had been in there, but he'd been afraid to voice it. And just the intonation is different in Miami than it was in Cuba with las abuelas. And that helped him bring it out because they spoke a lot slower. Like right now, I'm getting excited, so I'm getting faster. Over there was like chill and slow, and he brought it out. And my daughter was 2 at the time. Similarly, the first day or 2, she would look at me like, what are they saying? Because of the other children only spoke Spanish. And then they got along with her sharing her snacks, her American snacks with them. And eventually they didn't care what they were speaking. They were all running in the field, jumping fences, chasing cats, dogs, goats, pigs, like whatever they could find. And by the end, her Spanish had improved. So it's that like being together, sharing food, and sharing those, common stories and feelings and things that really help the language, and the language helps that connection as well.
So I think my dad always gives me very amazing like metaphors. And whenever I struggled with my Spanish, he would always say, oh, tú lo que tienes es la lengua pesada. like my tongue was heavy, and it's so true because like you said, it's there. It's like at the root of who we are. Like we were born speaking this language, or we heard it from our abuelas or our family, and it's part of like everything that we saw in our environment. So
Oh, by the way, and I love bringing my kids around when Lakshmi's here. Because then I'm like, hablen español. Las dos se tienen que hablar español. And then they look at me like, she speaks my language. I'm like, yeah.
yeah, I love that little bond that we have too. So
That's wonderful. All right, so I know we're getting close to the end, and I wanted to leave some time for a song as well. But I just wanted to share, briefly about the term Latinidad, because we, mentioned that as part of the theme for this year. So Latinidad is a Spanish language term that refers to the various attributes that are shared by Latin American people and their descendants, without reducing those similarities to any single essential trait, right? So we're looking at the idea of Latinidad as a global term for the experiences of Latino people. And it's also been a term that's been used for a lot of advocacy and resiliency building in the work that has been done by many, famous Latinos who have been actors, politicians, activists, singers, right? People who represent various of our Latino heritage in the countries that we come from. So I think that we've done a great job today in sharing stories, and I thank all of you that are been part of this panel in taking this time and having un cafecito con leche virtually with everyone. And yes, thank you. There I see the mugs going up. And sharing a bit of, our Latinidad with the Pennsylvania Western community and as members of the community ourselves, right, faculty and students. So I'd like to hand it over now to Sandra. I know if you wanted to share a little bit, I'm going to play a song that you'd like to share, but if you'd like to give us a little interlude, an introduction.
One of the reasons I'm wearing intentionally my red and my blue, white from the eyes, let's put it that way, the flag, the Costa Rican flag, because today is Independence Day in Costa Rica. So we are having a part in our hearts from afar. Is a national holiday in Costa Rica, and I grew up with this again, right? So this is a great day to have this panel. White, blue, and red. White because of the peace and the democracy. Red because of the rosy cheeks of the hardworking campesinos, farmers, who sustain, food security for Costa Rica and abroad. And the blue skies that I mentioned. So, the Costa Rica, is very committed to ecological sustainability and so on. But yes, the song is called Caña Dulce. Caña Dulce is sugarcane, and it is really a campesino, a farmer, agricultural farmer, singing on how he's dreaming of working with sugarcane when he has his little house to live with his beloved wife and have a good life, a simple life, a happy life. And that, I think, defines Latinidad in a lot of ways. It defines the global citizen. We don't want to be too segmenting here, but to me, being a Latino means what you've experienced today, which is at the end, I think, the essence of the human heart, being warm, relaxed. I mean, we go through stresses, but we can be very relaxed, family oriented. We can be loud, we can be expressive, we can be. We are also part of this world, and in the end, we share feelings and obstacles and challenges the same way people face them. And from the Latino perspective, we didn't get to talk about that, but maybe that's left for another panel, for another conversation. But yes, we do face our challenges that Stephanie brought up, the stereotypes and so on, even sometimes depending on the field we work in, right? We may be outnumbered by gender and so on, by ethnicity, demographics, but we try to work hard from inspirations like Stephanie's parents and Sheila's parents, and our stories of how we want to just embrace the opportunity we're given in a country that opens the doors to people who want to work hard and do good things for society. So Caña Dulce para Moler is a showcase of art, really, because it's a musical performance, voices. And it's a song that was written in the past, years and years ago. Is one of the traditions, one of the folkloric music that we listen in Costa Rica as we express our sentiment towards Costa Rica and in general Latin America. I think this can apply to every country. Thank you.
Caña dulce pa' moler cuando tenga mi casita. Ay, qué suerte tan bonita, ay, qué suerte tan bonita que pa' mí tendrá que ser. Cuando apunte el verolis y yo viva con mi nene, no tendré ninguna pena, no tendré ninguna pena y seré siempre feliz. Tendré entonces mi casita y una milpa y buenos bueyes y seré que no envidian ya nadita. Con mi Dios y mi moreno, caña dulce y buen amor, esta vida noble y buena, esta vida noble y buena, pasaré sin un rencor. Tendré entonces mi casita y una milpa y buenos bueyes y seré como esos reyes que no envidian, ay no, que no envidian ya nadita. Tendré entonces mi casita y una milpa y buenos bueyes y seré como esos reyes que no envidian, ay no nadita.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, again for attending today's, to all of our wonderful panelists. And thank you, those of you who joined the live stream. And, oh, there was video still going. And the recording will be available if you'd like to share with others or rewatch again. Thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of the month with various celebrations.
Saludos, chao, chao.
Ciao.
Thank you so
Hasta
much for
luego.
this.